Number one, welcome to Empower You. We're super proud to bring this platform where members can share their expertise with fellow members. And today we have our great member, Konstantin, who is the founder and CEO of Impact3P. You know, one of our missions here at the Chamber is to drive economic growth. And, there's nothing more important to that than having a return on investment. So, Konstantin is here today to talk us through, how to get the best of that and how to leverage some of the things that are already publicly available. So, without further ado, Konstantin, I don't know if you want to take us away.
Thank you, Christian, and hello, everybody, and welcome to Survive or Thrive, 10 Overlooked ROI Levers to Future-Proof Your Business. Now, I'm pretty sure you will, in a minute, be surprised from which angle I'm going to approach this, but I think that's really where the value lies, right? I'm not going to bring you stuff that you don't know already. Okay, so first of all, who am I? My name is Konstantin Popovic. And after a 3-decade-long corporate career, I founded Impact3P. And so I'm bringing my passion for creative problem solving to sustainability. Now, at this point, you're asking sustainability, isn't it about saving the planet? So let me give you first a couple of perspectives. The first one is not really about the planet, it's about us. Yeah. So if you think about pollution, if you think about other major impacts that we're already sensing, not just health. If you don't like migration now, you'll like climate migration even less. And after all, we're business people. So what about the money part of things? Yeah? So I can look at this in the macro and in the micro sense. So there is an enormous amount of cost that is already being produced by climate change, but it's going to get worse and worse, right? 38 trillion a year by 2050. That's much bigger than the US economy right now. Yeah? But then when you break it down to businesses, there's also ample research that looking at sustainability as a business lens actually increase financial performance, revenue growth, and so on and so forth. And sometimes you just gotta get a little creative to unlock opportunities that create impact across people, planet, profit. And now you know what Impact 3P means. That is kind of my passion point. So the question is, how can we turn sustainability into competitive advantage without major time and cost effort? Now, many listed companies have big teams in-house on these kind of things, and they're connecting with business units, they're creating value, easy for them. But what do smaller companies do? So what I'm gonna share with you is a simple pathway for smaller companies. And it starts with understanding that it's really about the business. And this is where our 10 levers come in. So in the next half hour or so, sit back, but also make it action oriented so you can get value out of it. Which examples that I'm going to take you through spark any ideas that can benefit your business? Which of the levers, maybe 2 or 3 of them, seem most relevant for you? I can guarantee you not everybody will find all 10 relevant. And then maybe leave with one action item that has the potential to improve your business quickly, right? This is about low-hanging fruit, okay? Everybody ready? So let's go through the 10. Number 1, this is downside protection. Reduce your risk, right? So there's a couple of stats and examples here. Natural disasters cause global losses of $320 billion, half of it uninsured in 2024. So if anybody tries to explain to you that this is not an issue, all you have to do is talk to the insurance industry. Everybody in insurance is wrestling with this, and you have heard about insurers leaving California and so on. And then on the business level, when you just look at climate as a risk factor and add it to your usual risk assessment, you will potentially discover blind spots that you need to take care of, like Walmart did when they looked at temperature increases and higher costs around cooling and refrigeration. So the question to ask yourself here is, what physical and what transition risks might you be exposed to across your value chain, and what can you do to avoid them? So just to explain a few things. So physical risk is if you're in a zone that is at flooding risk, near the river, let's say, that would be a physical risk. A transition risk can mean in regulation, in consumer preferences, in who you're dealing with, either upstream or downstream, in terms of your customers or your suppliers, right? So that's number one, reduce your risk. Tightly linked to it, but slightly different, is building your resilience. Okay. So a quick example from Texas, they developed a crisis communication plan. They have digital backup systems and flood mitigation practices because their steakhouse was in a flood prone area. And so one is to look at the risk, but the other one is to actually actively manage resilience, right? And here's a stat that should all make us pause. Uh, Almost a third of all small businesses are considered one crisis away from closure. A lot of big companies have the financial means to weather crises, but smaller businesses do not. So, are you actively building the capacity to soften the impact and bounce back from disasters, right? So, looking at the resilience plan is always a good idea. So, even if you stop there and you just took away from today, I got to manage risk and resilience, already you will have future-proofed your business significantly. But we will also look at some upsides, not just downside protection, right? So like the next one. This is the number one thing that anybody should look at to increase either revenues or decrease costs, which is resource efficiency, okay? And here's an example from the beer industry. Sierra Nevada is not a huge brand, but is also not a small brand. And they looked at waste management, and they were able to save $5 million by getting their waste to almost zero. So 99% of their waste is staying out of landfills. Okay. So on the energy side, there are statistics that in the US alone, $18 billion were saved through energy efficiency measures. This is some of the easiest things to do. So the question is, how can you quickly reap the cost benefits of resource efficiency? And there's three main areas here. One is energy, one is waste, and the third one is water. So again, if we ever talk to each other again or not, doesn't matter to me. You should just do that work. Look at your energy consumption, look at what happens to your waste, and look at your water consumption, and you will be able to identify savings through efficiencies. Now, let's go back to protecting the downside. Regulation. So regulation may be changing in different directions, whether you are looking at the federal level, at the state level, at the city level. Small businesses are affected by all. And so it's really important to stay in touch with all of them. And regulation exists on a very broad level, but also sometimes can get very specific to your industry, obviously, right? So let's look at 3M, for example, who announced that they're going to stop making forever chemicals. And then when you deep closer into the story, you realize that they were sensing that forever chemicals were hitting major pushback from regulators all around the world. This is a global company, so they have to manage many, many different regulations. And closer to home, if you look at different states in the US, extended producer responsibility, packaging laws are being discussed and enacted across the US. In New Jersey, there's also laws around recycling waste, different usage of plastics. So the simple job here is, are you monitoring all relevant regulations now so you can plan for changes and avoid fines later, right? And you need to really look at those from a federal, from a state, and from a local standpoint, right? And the three R's, resilience, risk, and regulation, they are a little bit connected to each other. So, because regulation can present transition risks, and you can get ahead of regulation by looking at your resilience plan and so on and so forth, right? So, now let's talk about something that is a little more exciting than regulation, which is R&D. There's tons and tons of examples where people use sustainability as an innovation lens. And this, of course, can mean very different things depending on your industry. So here's an example of Dove, who introduced Dove refillables in terms of a refillable, reusable deodorant, because they were picking up on their consumers, millennial women in particular, that they were changing habits and they were making sustainability a criteria for purchase. And then if you look closer in New Jersey, there's actually R&D grants, vouchers, et cetera, that support innovation across many of these areas: clean tech, biotech, ag tech, et cetera. So that is something, if you're anywhere close to these industries, that you should explore. So the ask here is, have you ever ideated new products, services, or even processes through the lens of sustainability to get ahead of your competition? So again, this is a good example where it's not about doing the right thing or saving the planet, which can be objectives, noble objectives. I subscribe to these objectives, but you actually don't have to in order to really look at this, because you need to look at your competition and whether you can create competitive advantage through innovation from sustainability. Okay, halfway through. Now, the next one is kind of critical, because a lot of small companies are in the supply chain of bigger companies. And a lot of these bigger companies have received a lot of pressure to clean up their supply chain. And what that means is they're going to put certain demands on their suppliers in order to reach their own climate goals. So here's two examples. Budweiser ties sustainability with procurement. IKEA prepares to drop non-compliant suppliers. So if you're in a business where somehow a customer of yours is one of the top 500 companies in the world, then you should pay attention to this, because they are. And then if you flip it and you look
Hey,
at the positive, yeah,
I'm sorry about that. We got a comment. Are you able to put it in, like, are you able to share it as a presentation?
presentation mode.
Yeah, because people can't see you. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Is this better?
Yep.
Oh, I'm sorry. Um, okay. Yeah. So if you flip it and you look at it from a positive standpoint, then companies who've done all the work to look at energy efficiency, to look at water, to look at waste, to also look at employee engagement, to look at what they're doing for the development of their employees, and even then took it a step further to certify as a B Corp, there's proof that they have grown more than the general SME growth. This is a stat from the UK. I'm pretty sure it's not all that different in the US, country that's similar to us here. And so what's a B Corp? So B Corp is an organization that will certify your B Corp status if you go through a rigorous questionnaire and provide a lot of data, and then provide certain goals, how you want to improve certain things, right? It's a little laborsome and something I can help with. Is actually an organization that serves predominantly small and medium-sized businesses. There's very, very few large organizations that are B Corps. Yeah? So this is why I'm bringing it up. So that's why there's two questions here. Yeah? Number one, are you at risk of not satisfying requirements of your customers, right? If you're in the supply chain of one of the big guys. But then secondly, are you leaving money on the table by not leveraging sustainability to boost revenues, right? So you can look at the revenue side on both sides. Now, what is even more important than revenues is profits, right? And here's an example that I think was quite shocking to Hertz themselves. So they increased their electric rentals fleet, and then they realized, oh, the maintenance for these is significantly cheaper than for regular IC cars. And so that had obviously a very positive impact on the profits, right? So that's an isolated example. In general, you will get margin improvement not from isolated big moves, but from embedding sustainability in your operations, right? And so there's a study by KPMG and IBM that looked at how people are addressing this and so-called sustainability embedders. Those were from the management to the frontline folks. Everybody is with the program. Everybody knows what they're trying to accomplish here. Those are much more likely to outperform their peers on profit margin, right? So can you use sustainability as a lens for margin improvement, right? This one is not the easier one of the 10, I'll admit. But unless you look at it, you won't be able to identify potential profit improvements here. Okay, now we're looking at reputation. So you can obviously choose to build an entire brand around this, right? So a brand that a lot of people know, but is a mid-sized brand, is not a big brand in the fashion category. Eileen Fisher built its reputation through multiple certifications. I mentioned B Corp, but also Fair Trade. So this is about sourcing of their fabrics. And Cradle to Cradle is a principle in circularity. I can talk about more. To attract conscious consumers willing to pay premium prices, right? So a significant shift in positioning, significant shift in reputation. But there's different kinds of reputation. There's also reputation with the financial industry. And 88% of investors consider ESG performance critical in investment decisions, while 64% of consumers may switch brands based on social alignment issues, right? So the first thing is to see like, okay, am I in a consumer business? Who are my consumers? Do my consumers care about this? What can I do to connect with them on sustainability to enhance my reputation, create that differentiation for competition, etc. But then also, what are my financing needs? And are they financing instruments that are advantageous? Yeah? Because there are a number of green finance instruments. And how can this journey make my situation better in terms of access to capital and so on? Right? So think of reputation across your entire stakeholder universe. And in this case, we're talking external stakeholders. We'll talk internal stakeholders in a second. So what would it take to increase the trust among your key external stakeholders, right? You could have an ideation just on that if you wanted to. Number 9, now we're going to go internal. So maximize recruitment and retention. Everybody will agree that employees are actually our most important stakeholders. And so there's a lot of proof that sustainability programs support employee engagement and satisfaction. Yeah? This has simply to do with the fact that a lot of people don't want to show up just to do a job. A lot of people want to show up and feel meaning. And you can create that meaning in different ways. Yeah? So in the healthcare industry, there's plenty of companies who say, like, I don't have to create meaning through sustainability. People here were saving lives. That is also meaning, right? So it's not the only area where you can create meaning, but it is a area, and it's an area where a lot of people are deeply committed to. If you look at this number, 74% of millennials believe their businesses have the potential to solve societal challenges, right? And again, this could be different societal challenges. The question is, have you ever asked yourself, what can you contribute here, right? and millennials are now getting into their early 40s. So we're talking about a large group of people with a lot of not just purchasing power, but they're also a large part of the workforce, right? So then the question becomes, what employee education and engagement could drive better recruitment, satisfaction, and higher retention? Because at the end of the day, rotation of candidates is costly. And then also, if you're I'm just going to use finance sector. If you're a Goldman Sachs, people are lining up to work for you. If you're an SME, getting the best talent actually isn't that easy. And so you have to think about, okay, how can I increase my employer brand profile so that I get the best candidates? I make sure that these best candidates are the happiest and they don't leave. And this is one area that you can consider to drive that. Now, last but not least, and this is maybe the broadest of them all. And in a sense, it sits above it, right? So it's mostly a strategic one, less so a tactical one. We looked at a lot of tactical ones, but here's a strategic one, and that is clarify your reason for being. Because the reason for being for any company is more than just making money, right? That is a reason for being. And we often say profit is like oxygen. You need it to live. No oxygen, no life. But oxygen in itself isn't the purpose of life, right? So think of that analogy when you're asking yourself, do I need a purpose? What is my purpose? Do people, if I have a purpose, understand that purpose? So firms with employees who maintain strong beliefs in the meaning of their work deliver better performance according to Harvard Business School. And I picked an example here from a company that I was engaging with in my previous role, which is Halion. They do a lot of products that you're familiar with, Centrum being one. They have painkillers and so on. And they worked with Microsoft and used AI to enhance product accessibility for blind and partially sighted people. So that feels like a small idea, tactical idea. It's not part of their core business, but it's just an example how they're bringing their purpose to life to deliver better everyday health with humanity. And then from there, they can launch ideas like this, which create differentiation, which enhance reputation. Think about how retailers react to that. So there are a whole host of positive impacts coming out of it, but they would have never thought of an idea like that if they hadn't defined their purpose first. So deliver better everyday health with humanity is their purpose. Okay. So the question to ask here is, have you ever thought about having a purpose? Is your purpose something, you cooked up in 5 minutes, or is it clearly defined? And then most importantly, and this is where a lot of the work needs to happen for companies that already have a purpose is it a foundation for your business strategy, your business operations, and your business culture? Because the one thing you don't want is for purpose to just be a paper tiger or even like a slogan on the wall, but it's not really integrated. Okay. So, as a recap, regardless of whether you care about the planet or you care about the well being of humanity and so on and so forth, which of course you should, but even if you don't, here are 10 good reasons why you should look at sustainability as a ROI driver. It will help you reduce your risk. And we talked about physical risks and we talked about transition risks. Once you look at risk, it'll be much easier to also build your resilience because you need to anticipate potential problems and you need to have plans how to prepare for these problems and then bounce off from these problems. We looked at the scary statistic of 27% of small businesses being one disaster away from bankruptcy. Then we looked at one of the easiest ways you can take this presentation and turn it into money, which is increase your resource efficiency. And we talked about three different levers. There's others, right? But the big ones are energy. The second one is waste. And the third one is water. Yeah. Then we talked about regulation. And while on a federal level, all you're hearing is, oh, we're going to loosen up regulation, that doesn't mean that states and cities aren't going to do the opposite. We're not in New York City here, but I actually look at New York City. I'm right by the water. And if you are following the conversation about who's going to be the next mayor, you know that in New York City, people are actually looking at potential transitional risk from that new mayor, looking at what regulation might hit them, and, right? So that's kind of how you should think about it. And same goes for New Jersey governor. I don't want to be reading the tea leaves, but I could anticipate certain environmental regulations actually tighten up with the new candidate who's currently leading the polls. Now, then when you look inwards, everybody in their businesses are looking for innovation. Now, R&D is a big term, and in big companies, it's often a department that has money, etc. But if you're a bakery and it's competitive because there's lots of bakeries in your neighborhood, you're thinking, okay, what can I offer that my neighbor isn't offering? That's also R&D. That's innovation. And you can look at sustainability as an innovation driver, right? And so we looked at different ways how you can look at it. You can look at it on a product level, you can look at it on a service level, and you can even look at it on a process level, right? So stimulate your innovation. Then we looked at protecting and boosting revenues. We talked about the downside protection here is you don't want to get kicked out of a supply chain in which you are, because your customers, if you're in B2B and you have customers who care a lot about this and who have commitments, goals, and are sifting through their suppliers with that lens, right? You could get hurt. But then on the positive side, there's lots of good ways to boost revenue, and even number 7, increase profits, as we've seen in the example of Hertz. It's just something that you need to do a little bit more digging. And of course, these things are not all mutually exclusive. Any one of these can also help with increasing returns, right? Then we looked at reputation. Number 8, we looked at stakeholder reputation from an external stakeholder standpoint. And you have consumers as a stakeholder, but you have potentially other stakeholders as well, like the financial industry, your bank is a stakeholder, your insurance company is a stakeholder, and so on and so forth. So how can you use this to improve reputation with all these external stakeholders? Number 9 takes reputation in-house, if you will, right? And this is about employees who deeply care about the subjects. There's plenty of research on this. And in a situation where smaller businesses are really fighting for the best talent, this is something that you should look at. And then once the talent is in the house, you want to make sure that you also make these people happy and avoid attrition and increase your retention rate. And one of the ways to really create the foundation for all of the above, and especially take care of a couple of things like inspiration for R&D, inspiration for your employees, is clarify your reason for being. That is either developing a purpose or making sure, even a more important step 2, that your purpose is driving your business strategy, is embedded in operations, and drives your business culture. Okay, so you might be saying, I'm clear now. Sustainability is a business driver. I should care about it regardless of what else I think. How do I get started? So we just done step 1, which is understanding that it is about a business. So the second step then is identifying what matters most. And that is not something that we can do in a webinar here because obviously that'll mean very different things for each company. And this is where I can help. And just to be clear, you don't have to do this. Technically, you can get started and pick one or two of these things and just get going by yourself. But if you're looking for a more structured approach, here's what I can offer. This is specifically made for small businesses to identify how quickly reap the benefits of sustainability as a business lens, right? And it is a three-step process, right? With a 3-hour workshop over 3 weeks. Doesn't have to be consecutive weeks. Sometimes leaving space between the workshops is helpful. Um, and in the first one, right, week one is creating focus. So we'll work through 6 different opportunity areas to agree on the 2 to 3 that are most relevant to your business, right? So we start very broad, and then we use that first work session to increase focus. The second then is to take these 2 or 3 focus areas and generating ROI driving ideas. And then in workshop 3, an idea is just an idea until you create concrete action plans against the best ideas, right? So between 2 and 3, there's a triaging of ideas because in number 2, you could end up with too many ideas, right? And so now you're wondering why this way of working, right? Can't you just come in, do the research, give us recommendations? Well, a lot of people work like this, but I don't believe in this. And the simple reason is that number one, the best ideas are already inherent in your business and nobody knows them better than yourself. And number two, this is one easy way to also create alignment along the way. So rather than the person at the top saying like, hey, come in and do this, and then we'll try to convince the rest. No, we do this with the group of people that you consider relevant. It can be just the leadership, but usually it's better if it's the leadership plus other people. And then you essentially co-create this so that by the time you're in step 3, you actually already have alignment and you have sort of you don't waste time with now trying to get people on board, right? So this is why this approach. Okay, so this concludes my presentation. I went fast in order for us to be able to have a conversation. Now, Christian, you mentioned there's questions in the chat. Do you see some already?
Yes,
Because
sir.
I cannot see them, right?
I have a handful actually. So, number one, I have someone who wants to get, can they also get the PDF version of your presentation or?
Yes, absolutely. I will send a presentation out to Christian right after this, and then anybody who is interested can have it. And of course, if some of you are saying like, hey, the first step really should be that you give this presentation to my whole team, then I can also do that for free, right?
Awesome. So yeah, Ajwani, you'll get the recording and you'll get the PDF version of this as well. So thank you for that. Um, Number one, so how do tariffs and the push against globalism impact strategies?
Yeah, wow. That's a big question. So obviously, tariffs, while super broad, hit different companies in different ways, and there's no one size fits all on how you should deal with them. Because it depends on your business and are you in a consumer business? Are you in a B2B business? What's your capability to absorb? What's your capability to pass on, and so on and so forth, right? Um, the the globalization goes 2 ways, right? So on the incoming way, right, we have tariffs, but the administration is also very keen on more export, right? So again, it depends a little bit on what your business is. If your business is highly reliant on supply chains that sit outside of the US, I think what I would look at is, okay, what are, let's just say, tweaks to supply chain, right? Because one part of this is how can we bring some of the supply chains back into the US? Now, I have my own points of views on how successful that will be. And the reality is that the devil is in the detail. In some industries, it'll work easier, and some it'll be very hard. But so if that's your case, then of course you got to map out your supply chain and look at potential changes to that. But if you're in a very export-oriented business, then this should actually benefit you because that is a priority of the current administration. I hope I answered that super broad question. Of course, there's many layers to it once you get down to a particular industry.
Awesome. So, are there any tips that you can provide to service providers in terms of cost savings?
Service providers. Well,
That was
um,
broad, yeah.
yeah, it's a little broad. So it is true that when you look at cost savings, if I go to what is this? Resource efficiency, right? Is no, here it is, right? If we go to this slide, it is true that a lot of these cost benefits will be higher when you have manufacturing or retail, right? So in retail, there's enormous waste you can look at. In manufacturing, there's enormous energy waste and water, depending what kind of manufacturing. So when you look at service providers, some of these things may not apply as much as, in particular, waste, right? But it doesn't mean that you can't look at energy and water. The savings from simple adjustments in lighting and heating are staggering for anybody who has some kind of office, right? So that's sort of where this applies also to service providers.
Makes sense. So, there's frequent conflict between management and those interested in sustainability. How do you broach the conversation and make sure you don't get in any trouble?
Well, first of all, nobody would want to get into trouble. Yeah. Um, if you think about how I opened this up, I specifically made it about money. Yeah. Not because these are my personal beliefs. If you want to know my personal beliefs, is uh, I want the next generations to have it as good as we have. But the trajectory right now is not great, right? So if you think of your children, of your grandchildren, that's a lens that you should also apply and then think about like, oh, do I have responsibility here? But I explicitly didn't go to that place because of your question, because oftentimes management has points of views that could range from, oh, I don't believe in that stuff, or we don't have time for this stuff. So the business argument is what breaks through that barrier, right? And the business argument, again, sits on two levels. First of all, there is a massive impact to GDP. Yeah. And this is GDP everywhere. Yeah. So I have the number somewhere. So if you just look at the US, yeah, and last year, 180 billion in costs just from climate disasters. Yeah. So this is about half of what the government is going to collect in tariffs. So all that drama about tariffs and half of it disappears in costs for climate disasters. I mean, and that trajectory will get worse. So that's the macroeconomics level. The microeconomics level is there is study after study after study after study that there is a link. Yeah. And so you have to talk to management, not through, you have to come through the, I want to, not through the, I want to save the polar bears and let's plant more trees door. Yeah. Which oftentimes when you have bottom up employee first movements, that's kind of the door they come through. You have to literally leave all the morality aside and just come through the money door, right? That is kind of one way to talk to management. And I have tools, right? So the tool that I showed you is a let's get to action tool, but I have other tools that are there to convince um, management. Yeah. So there's other things we can do together, but this is kind of the main point here. Yeah?
Awesome. And are there ways that the chamber can help to push this topic along, perhaps by building a coalition, or is that kind of counter to what you're promoting?
Well, this is a question to both of us, I think, but definitely, definitely. So the one thing that I didn't really touch is that um, the work that's being done in this area, whether it's a big company, a small company, etc., um, lives off partnering with others. Yeah. And of course, the first level of partners are your direct stakeholders. But any sort of association, whether it's a broader association like the chamber or it's a more narrow association like your industry associations, right? They need to be considered partners. Yeah? I was telling Christian before we get going that I'm doing a workshop at a convention for the semiconductor industry next week, right? So this is the association that is convening their members to do a workshop together, right? So that's cross-industry collaboration. And in fact, on all of these things, if you are a small company in an industry where there's lots of big companies, you know that these big companies have already looked at certain things. So you can also accelerate your journey by just looking at what can I learn from my industry, right? And then separately, of course, this is just the beginning of a conversation. And, Christian, Emery, and I will have a think about how can we be supportive beyond this, as a chamber. Christian, you also have point of view, babe.
Absolutely. And finally, what resources would you recommend for creating these strategies, or like how, I guess, did you think to create these strategies in case anyone, wants to build off of this?
Yeah, so there's tons of resources out there. Um, you will probably get lost in them. So I have two pieces of advice for those who say like, okay, let me start this journey on my own. Yeah. So here's how I would start it on my own. I would take a narrow industry lens. Yeah, because if you're a chain of coffee shops, it's going to be very different than if you are a supplier in the car industry. Yeah. I mean, so in the car industry, a lot of this work has been done. In the F&B industry, a lot of thinking has been done. So you want to profit from the industry. Yeah? And then you go and explore that. And that'll lead you to resources that are not broad, but they're quite specific, right? Um, and I think that that would be my recommendation in terms of starting point.
Awesome. Well, I believe we, got through the list of questions from the chat. I want to first thank Constantine for your time and for, bringing this great topic to our chamber. Things like this are definitely valuable to business owners, and we're going to make sure to get this up online. And we're going to get everyone who signed on that PDF so that you guys have this for your reference. But, we appreciate everyone tuning in.
Yeah, and in the meantime, here's my I don't know if you can see this way. Here's my email address, kp@impact3p.com. Feel free to reach out. I mean, you'll get the PDF from Christian, but if you want to reach out one-to-one, here it is.
Awesome. Well, we're gonna stop our recording there. Thank you.